13 hours before Secret of the Mimic came out, I released a theory video discussing the Mediocre Melodies, where they came from, and what their purpose is in the world of Fazbear Entertainment, discussing the evidence I found in Sister Location, the Puppet Carver, and even the Steam screenshots for Secret of the Mimic itself. But leave it to FNaF to completely disprove my theory less than a day after it comes out. Yeah, nearly everything I said in that Mediocre Melody theory is completely wrong now, and it's all because of one note that we can find in Secret of the Mimic. So in this video, I want to do an updated version of that video from a couple weeks ago, talking about what I got right, what I got wrong, and the brand new information Secret of the Mimic gave us. So without further ado, let's get started. My Mediocre Melody theory was all about how I believed that they were meant to be Fazbear characters that weren't very popular and were instead used as side characters. I was under the impression that it wasn't a solid group, but rather a fluctuating one, changing when characters lost popularity or gained it. So, in the 70s and 80s, it would have consisted of Mr. Hippo, Orville, Pigpatch, Monty, frogs as little music minions, and some random blue character. This lines up with what the teaser images in Secret of the Mimic show, and also with the masks we see in Happiest Day, the green one being Monty, pink being Pigpatch, orange being an elephant, purple being Mr. Hippo, and then there's a random blue one. We also know these characters from Happiest Day aren't spirits considering they're in color when the missing kids and Charlotte are in black and white. Since Happiest Day is the memory of the Bite of 83, these masks must be characters that were present at Fredbear's Family Diner. Under this interpretation, Happy Frog isn't one of the masks, since the frogs are just small minions that aren't important enough to have their own masks. However, there's more to it than just that. There's also the mention of Chica's Party World back when Sister Location came out. Because the Puppet Carver had a pig and a bear animatronic alongside a bird character, some believe Chica was once a Mediocre Melody since she fits with the theme. This allows Chica's Party World to have Chica and the Mediocre Melodies. Chica gets adopted for the Core 4, and then later Monty and the blue character are discontinued, being replaced by Happy Frog as her own full animatronic as well as Ned Bear, a Fredbear or Freddy ripoff. However, because Chica's Party World existed during Sister Location, it seemed more like after Freddy shut down, Chica branched off to have her own restaurant, and that's where the Mediocre Melodies flourished. All the evidence seemed to line up with this, at least until the actual game itself came out. It's kinda crazy that I made a theory on Chica's Party World, something that hasn't been mentioned in like 9 years, the night before a game came out actually explaining it. In Secret of the Mimic, we meet the new version of Chica present at Chica's Party World, Party Time Chica, an animatronic in the style of Edwin's animatronics, but with roller skates. Her bib also says Party Time on it. There's a bunch of posters and even a film reel showing off the characters at Chica's Party World. There's Mr. Cupcake, Miss Burger, and Miss Shake, all also with roller skates. The Mediocre Melodies weren't a part of this restaurant. Also, this is from the beginning of the timeline and before Chica was enlisted as a part of the Core 4 Fazbear gang, before Freddy's opened. I plan on doing a video on how the Core 4 and Freddy Fazbear's Pizza itself came together, but the point here is that Chica's Party World existed all the way back in the 70s, and I was wrong in thinking that the Mediocre Melodies got their time to shine there, right? Well, not necessarily, at least not yet, because we still know that Chica's Party World existed a long time after this, as it exists during the events of Sister Location as I said before. Given it's a client of Afton Robotics, it likely utilized Funtime Chica, but does it use anyone else? Well, it could very well still use the Mediocre Melodies. The only real indication of this possibly being the case is the Puppet Carver, so it's not very solid, but it is possible. So, is that all? Because by no means does any of that debunk the rest of my theory. Unfortunately for me though, something else does. Throughout Secret of the Mimic, we can plug our data diver into various things. It essentially acts as a USB, so every time we plug it into a computer, all our maps, logs, and progress through moon.exe is displayed, then remains in the data driver when we unplug it. It also allows us to activate programs in other computers as well as save data from them, such as the Mimic blueprints. Something else we can use our data driver on in the game is mailboxes that we can find scattered around the facility. Every time we put our data driver into one, a log is saved to it. There's over 40 mailboxes, and all these logs have lore about Murray's Costume Manor. There's logs from William Afton, logs about Springlock suits and Henry, logs about the Mimic, and most importantly in this case, there's a lot of logs from employees at the Costume Manor. A lot of these employees complain about their working conditions. The employees had created a group chat through the logs so they could have a place to talk to each other without Edwin seeing, because they feel like Edwin is always listening. They talk a lot about how Edwin is really secretive and suspicious, biased towards his family, and just overall doesn't run the company nearly as well as his father father did. He's not a great boss, and a bunch of employees get really tired of it. Here's one of the notes we can find in the game. Quote, "Me and Stan are out of here. It's time to jump ship before things get ugly. I have a bunch of Fiona's character patterns and Stan is taking what he can. Join us. With everything we know about the restaurant project, we can start our own machine shop." End quote. When I first saw this note, my idea was that this machine shop would end up being bought out by Fazbear Entertainment, and this guy and Stan would end up working for the company, handing over Fiona's designs for Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, and being the Springlock suits that are used for Fredbear's Family Diner, the ones in FNaF 4. However, as you may have seen in my Secret of the Mimic theory discussion video, or the live stream the video was made from, my friend Altera actually told me about an alternate idea, so shout out to him for letting me know because I don't know if I would have made this connection on my own. Like I said, there's one guy whose name we don't know, and another guy named Stan. We know they take some of Fiona's designs, and they intend to start their own machine shop using the knowledge they got from working for MZM. So there's a couple things to determine here. 1. Is this machine shop something we've seen before or already know about? 2. Which of Fiona's designs were used? Let's start with the first question. Technically speaking, we don't know if these two actually do create a machine shop, and if they do, we don't know if it's something we already know about. But it would be kind of weird if it wasn't, otherwise why bring it up at all? All we know about it would be the name of one of the founders, Stan. We don't know the other guy's name though, but that's okay. So, where in the series have we heard the name Stan before? Not many places. I don't remember if there were any side characters in Frights or Tales stories or even any interactive novels, but one notable appearance of the name would be Stanley, the main character from Room for One More. Another would be Stanley from the Silver Eyes trilogy, a unicorn toy that Henry makes for Charlotte. But those things don't seem to be at all related to any machine shops. What about the second question though? Which of Fiona's designs would they have taken? Well, there's a few options. We know Fiona designed Party Time Chica from the logs, and we know from the tapes in the parachute ending that she also designed the FNaF 1 animatronics and those renditions of Fredbear, Spring Bonnie, Bub, and Monty. However, the issue is that the same tape that explains that also says that Fazbear Entertainment isn't using them. That Fredbear and Spring Bonnie are different Springlock suits designed by Fiona and Edwin, while the ones from Fredbear's were made by Henry. Bub and Monty are never actually used, at least not these versions of them, so taking these blueprints wouldn't do much for Fazbear. They only end up using Fiona's designs when they redesign the Core 4 for FNaF 1, but the rest all go completely unused, or in the case of Chica, already used by Fazbear Entertainment, so it doesn't make much sense for these employees to take them and use them, whether for their own company or for a Fazbear restaurant. So what businesses do we know of in FNaF outside of Fazbear Entertainment, Muriko, and Afton Robotics that could possibly fit this role? One thing from Sister Location that was never explained was the CRMN Institute, but with the lack of information about it, it doesn't really fit the bill. But Fazbear Frights also gives us quite a few animatronic businesses outside of Fazbear Entertainment. After Freddy's closed from the missing children incident, the building gets bought out by numerous companies and becomes many other restaurants, including Flo's Fabulous Eatery as well as a bear-themed pancake shop. But there's no real indication that these locations have animatronics, especially since the building already had bad press with all locations other than Jeff's going out of business quickly, so adding animatronics to these locations would just put them in the ground faster. One other idea could be Camp Atenia, the location visited in the story Bunny Call. However, Ralpho in that story isn't actually an animatronic, but rather a costume. Sure, they could have taken the costumes from MCM, but it feels more like they would have stolen animatronics, since I doubt there would need to be blueprints for said mere costumes. The next option is the pizza playground itself from the Puppet Carver. The restaurant in the story has a pig animatronic, a bear animatronic, and a bird animatronic, all different characters that are at MCM and could have been designed by Fiona. There's the pig with the lasso, Freddy and Fredbear themselves, or possibly Bub, and the bird from Ruin or Party Time Chica. However, like I said before, the audio log mentions using animatronics Fiona designed that were not being used. Party Time Chica is used, and Freddy and Fredbear are also used. So we'd be narrowed down to the pig with a lasso, the bird from Ruin, and Bub.
Hey guys, Evan editing here. I just want to say, this is assuming Bub is actually a bear at all, because I assume that he is because he's based on Bubba from FNaF World, which is a bear, but also the bow tie is a lot more reminiscent of like a bone, like Sparky the dog, and the head shape looks a lot like Fetch, so it could very well be a dog animatronic rather than a bear, in which case this doesn't work anyway.
However, it would be weird if they were taking Fiona's designs for a small pig from the Welcome Show, an actual fully fledged animatronic, and a classic Fredbear style Springlock suit. They're all completely different, and while it's entirely possible whatever blueprints they used were altered over time, it would be kind of weird to start with characters that are completely different from one another. But personally, I don't think that matters too much, so this is the first option that is actually a decent possibility, or at least it would be if it weren't for what I'm going to talk about next, and that is FNaF 6's catalog mode. 3 of them are pretty unimportant. There's Dumpster Diver Weekly and Rare Finds Auctions, which aren't actual companies, they're literally just trash and auctions, and there's also Smiles and Servos Inc., which is a company, so it could work, but nothing in it really suggests that, since it's the catalog with the rock stars, which don't match any of Fiona's designs. And that leaves only one catalog, and the name of it is Stan's Budgetech. Remember how Stan was one of the guys who left MCM with the blueprints? One of the guys who left to start his own machine shop in the first place? Yeah. And guess what animatronics you can buy from Stan's Budgetech? The Mediocre Melodies. And as I've already talked about, the Mediocre Melodies are characters from MCM, which Fiona could have easily designed. We have the orange elephant, the pig with the lasso, the frogs, Mr. Hippo, and Ned Bear doesn't have to be there because he's a knockoff of Freddy or Fredbear. The character encyclopedia also talks a lot about the Mediocre Melodies and gives some insight into why all this makes sense. It mentions how the Mediocre Melodies seem to be a deliberate attempt at mimicking Fazbear characters, which matches how the designs were stolen from Fiona. Part of Happy Frog's personality is also feeling underestimated, which makes sense if she was originally just dwindled into the small frog minions. It also mentions how Ned Bear seems to be an actual knockoff of Freddy Fazbear, only changed slightly to avoid getting sued, which makes sense since they literally stole those designs from a company that was making stuff for Fazbear, meaning these things could have been originally for Fazbear. Stan and whoever wrote that log stole the Mediocre Melody designs that Fiona made, then created a knockoff Freddy character, and used those designs to create the versions of the Mediocre Melodies that we see in FNaF 6, which they used for their own business that they made, Stan's Budgetech. It also explains the masks in Happiest Day. Those aren't the Mediocre Melodies at all, they're the original characters that Fiona did design. That explains why the green one looks more like an alligator, it's not Happy Frog at all, and the blue one could easily be like Hedgehog Hudgy or something. These are the Mediocre Melodies' predecessors, not the characters themselves, rather what those animatronics that Stan's Budgetech made were based on. But that's everything there is to talk about for this video. It's really nice that Secret of the Mimic is answering a lot of questions that we've had for so many years, and I'm really excited to delve deeper into them with future theory videos. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys!